We're up to the Tzadik Zayin Amid Aleph. We're up to Tzadik Vav Amid Aleph. The Mishnah on Tzadik Vav Amid Aleph, right? We just saw the last Mishnah. What was the difference between Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach and Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni? Today we're going to see the difference. What was the difference between Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Rishon? What's the difference between our Pesach and Pesach Mitzrayim? Fascinating Gemara. Ma bein Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Dairis. Pesach Mitzrayim mechum miba'asar. The first thing, you took it from Yud. You took the animal on Yud and Nisan. In Bisman Hazeh, we don't do that. V'toyin hazah ba'agudas ezoiv. You needed hazah. You needed spritzing with a haisap, ala mashkoif yal shtei mezuzos, on the lintel and on the lintel and the two side posts. V'necha b'chipazayin, and it was eaten in haste. Right, we were going out. V'layla echad, one night. Pesach Dairis no kol shiva. That last clause seems to be a problem because we know if it's going on the card of Pesach, it's also only one night. So we'll see what exactly that means. We're going to qualify that last thing. Okay, now, minolon, how do you know that what? How do you know that you have to take from the 10th day? Dichsiv dabru el kol adas Yisrael leimar be'eser lachodesh hazeh b'yikchu. So it says, on the 10th day of Nisan, you should take, and it says the word zeh. Zeh means this, and meaning this time and not other times. The word zeh, this, is a miyut. It's an exclusion. So when it says the exclusionary term zeh, it's mashma, only then do you have to take it on the 10th, but future generations not. Zeh mechav b'asar, the ain pesach doiris mechav b'asar. The pesach of future generations is not taken on the 10th. Now, we're going to go through the whole parsha and go through every single possible miyut and say why it's not. In other words, we go through the whole parsha, and at the end of Parshas Bo. What does it say? It says, Elamiyata, v'hoyu lochem le'mishmeres. Now, mishmeres means you watch it, that it shouldn't have a mum, that you separate it, and ensure that it doesn't have a blemish. So, v'hoyu lochem, this animal should be for you, le'mishmeres, for a watching, literally, at arba asayoim lachodesh hazeh. So what would you think when it says achodesh hazeh? Meaning the only animal that requires watching is Pesach Mitzrayim, because it says zeh, which is mashma only then. Says the Gemara, hachanami zeh toyin bikar dalet yamim kodim shchita being achar toyin bikar. And no other animal requires bikar watching it to check that it doesn't have a mum. That's not true. But Tanya, and bad nagoymer, minayin letamid shetoyin bikar dalad yamin kodim shchita. How do you the carbon tamid requires 4 days of watching? So you see that what? That watching of 4 days is not limited to the carbon Pesach Mitzrayim. So what about you telling me the zeh is a miyut? You see, it's not true because the zeh by bikar is not true. So maybe the zeh by taking it on the 10th day is also not true. Shenemar tishmeru lakliv ma'adai. You should. It says by the carbon tamid, you should watch it to be makriv ma'adai. Ulahalu noim of hoyachal mishmeres araba asa. Malahalu toim bika by Mitzrayim. Dalu yamim kodim shlita afkan by the carbon tamid. I guess with the word mishmeres and tishmeru, the same service of shamar, that you should watch it, that it should have a mum toim bika dalu yamim kodim shlita. So l'chayra, what about Pesach Mitzrayim? Still a shiny hasam. Dichsiv tishmeru. It says tishmeru. And here's the key to the Gemara, guys. Here's the key to the Gemara. Pesach doris namik haksiv. This is a proof. It's not a kasha. Pesach doris mitzrayim namik ksiv ve'avarato es avoida hazois b'chodesh hazeh. So when it says the lashon of this avoida, that sheyikol avoida shchodesh kizeh, every avoida of Nisan should be like the avoidus of zeh, of Mitzrayim, until we're mamayit. So now we're going to go through piece by piece the whole parsha there, saying if that's the case, why don't you exclude something? And we'll see what the exclusion is. So again, the word avara to the key to the sugya, avara tells me that just like in Pesach Mitzrayim this transpired, so too future generations hachodesh hazeh and Nishan should be like this, right? Elahu zeh lemute Pesach sheni. This zeh that it says by It says at arba asa yom lachodesh hazeh, until 14 days of this, has nothing to do with Bikkur. It has to do with what? Zeh does not mean to limit it to Mitzrayim, because Mitzrayim needed Bikkur, and future generations of the Talmud also needed Bikkur. So what is the meat of Zeh? The meat of Zeh is for Pesach Sheni, right? The Kavah say that Pesach Sheni is one day, right? That Pesach Sheni is one day, similar to Mitzrayim, and that does not need Bikkur. Pesach Mitzrayim requires Bikkur. Pesach Sheni, which is very similar to Mitzrayim because it's for one day, does not require Bikkur. Zeh in Mitzrayim requires, Pesach Sheni doesn't require. Elameata, if you're telling me that anytime you have a meat, you mean my things Elameata, Tichsiv, v'achlu es abasa b'layla hazeh, it says by Mitzrayim, thou shalt eat the meat on this night. Hachanami dezeh necha b'layla, v'ein acher necha b'layla. So meaning, only in Mitzrayim did you eat it at night, but every other future what Pesachim you would not eat at night, because it says the meat. It says zeh. It says Amakrava Avarta es avoida. Again, guys, that's a riboy. V'avad es avoida. Kol avoida is of Nisan should be like this. So that teaches me that you also eat it at night. So now what's the question? What's the meat of zeh? That's the format of the Gemara. The Gemara is questioning what the meat. The Gemara includes it with avarata, and the Gemara says a meat, another meat. Says the Gemara. Oh. So what does it say? So therefore, what? We know that you eat it during the night. Ela hazel lamali. So what does the zeh, the meat by achila, teach me? The Chedr Elazar ben Azariah or Rabbi Akiva. Right. Elazar ben Azariah comes to teach me that it's only till Chatzos. You guys, usually kabbanis are until the morning. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says till Chatzos. We are chayish to that. That's what we're makbid to eat the afikoyim until Chatzos. So hazeh, meaning this teaches me that he says until Chatzos, and Rabbi Akiva says that it's the shlomim. Zeh, only this one is eaten for a night, but a shlomim is eaten for 2 days and a night. In other words, I guess one that comes to shlomim. We're going to see that as Hashem in Arvei Pesachim. For Rabbi Akiva, Elamayata. Now you're telling me the zeh is a meat. It says by Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim, any oral, any uncircumcised person should not eat. Hachanami, the boy ain't a oichel. Oral can't eat Pesach Mitzrayim. Again, boy is a meat. It. Aval oichel Pesach Dairis, but Pesach future generations, an oral could. We know that's not true. An oral could eat in Mitzrayim, and an oral can't eat from the Korban Pesach. Guys, in fact, if your son or your Eved Kanani is an oral, you can't eat from the Korban Pesach. Ad kedei kach. If you're a mallet and your son is not, and your Eved's not, there in Ma'aki you can eat the Korban Pesach. So we see that why it is not for future generations. So why does the boy, the Miyad come? Amakra, the Pasuk says, Avarata. Avarata means that all future generations. So that's the obvious question. Ella boy, what about the Miyad boy? Lamali. Boy ain't a oichel, aval oichel b'matzah mara. The oral can eat the Korban Pesach, but he could eat matzah mara. He could be in the mitzvah of matzah mara. Separate mitzvahs than the Korban Pesach. Elamiyato, you're telling me that there was a miyot. It says, Kol ben necher lo yochal boy. Anyone who makes himself a ben necher to Hashem, a person who's off the derech and he denies HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kol ben necher, lashon necher makes himself a fremda, a foreigner. Boy, hachanami, the boy and oichel, aval oichel is a Pesach the Doiris. We know that a ben necher can I eat Pesach Doiris. Amakrov Evarata, same limud. Ela boy lamali, boy hamaras das paiselis. Over there, if you're rebellious, you can eat Korban Pesach. Vein hamaras das paiselis b'truma. But if you're a kohen who's married das, meaning you go off the derech, you could eat truma. So again, the format saying you should be out because it's a miyot, but Avarata bringing you in and then using the miyot for something else. You need to tell me that an oral, and you need to tell me ben necher. Because Rachmana oral mishum demoyis. It's if a person is uncircumcised, it's disgusting. In Yiddish we say it's fashtup. Aval ben necher leimoyis emeloy. I'd say maybe you could eat. So tzricha. Tell me not. Yes, ben necher mishum the ein liboy l'shemayim. Because therefore you can't eat. Aval oral liboy shemayim. Guys, an oral Rashi says is a person whose older brothers died as a result of the milah. So he's a fine Jew. He's in a never situation, but he's okay, right? So the fact that it's an oral, the oral is something. No, but the oral doesn't mean halachically. It means like something. It's a davar moisad moed. Ein maloi sricha. Now skip the next few lines to the next elamiyata. Rashi takes it out. The elamiyata to the next one. Elamiyata umalto isai. Count down. One, two, three lines. Elamiyata umalto isai, and you'll go ahead and give a mila to your what? Your eved. Oz yoichal boy. Then you could eat. That's the halach I just told you that the milas avdoi ma'akas v'yiduchar Pesach. Achanami the boy in the oichel avaloichel Pesach toiris. Amakra pasuk says v'avarata. I know Pesach toiris also. Why? Because it says v'avarata, meaning they're all v'avarata. This avoida for all generations. Ela boy lamali. So what about the meat of boy? Boy mila sachru v'avoda me'akeves. After by Korban Pesach is the mila of the males and his avodim stop him. Vein milas zachru avodim akeves b'truma v'zakayin. Right? And he has an eved that's an oral or a son that's an oral, he can still eat from truma. Al miyata dechsiv ve'etzem lo yishbru boy hachanami the boy in the shav al shav pesach the dairis. You tell me only by Korban Pesach is there in Mitzrayim was the din of shviras etzem, but not future generations, which we know not to be true. Same teretz amakrova varata. El boy lamali. What does the boy come to exclude? Boy b'kosher v'lo psul. Boy b'kosher. After an animal that's kosher and not an animal that's puzzled. The animal's puzzled. There's no din of shviras etzem. El miyata dechsiv al tochel mimenu no mumenu. You don't shouldn't even half roasted. Iyata oichel mimenu iyata oichel aval ota oichel no pesach l'dairos. And we know it's not true. We know that's a din of no by future generations. Al makra the pasuk says bevarata el mimenu lamali lichiderad l'Rabba bar Yitzchak. We need for Rabbi Yitzchak's din that it says oral by Pesach. It says oral by Pesach. My Maisa Sheni, just like an oral can eat from Korban Pesach, an oral cannot eat Maisa Sheni. Mimenu, we learn Gzeira Shalom. Okay. Now, the last line of the Mishnah was very problematic. Let's look back at the Mishnah. It says, "V'alshtein mezuzas v'necha b'chipazim b'layla echad u'pesach doris no yikol shiva." Now, literally, it seems to be that in Mitzrayim the Korban Pesach was 1 day, and after the Dairos, the Korban Pesach was 7 days. We all know by the time this Masechta, Korban Pesach was not 7 days. So what do we do with that line? Says the Gemara, Pesach Doris no yikol shiva, amai koi. What's going on? Ilema Pesach. If you're going to tell me it's going on the Korban Pesach, Pesach kol shiva miyika. Do you have a Pesach 7 days on middays? You don't have a Pesach 7 days. It makes no sense. Ella must be going on Chametz. Meaning, in Mitzrayim, there was a din of Chametz 1 day, and Pesach, Chametz is going on 7 days. Freg the Mur, Machal the Pesach Mitzrayim, Laila Echad, Mashma was only 1 night, because the Korban Pesach was 1 night, and you're telling me the Pesach means Chametz, so it's Mashma, the din of Chametz was only Mitzrayim was only 1 night. I'll show you it's not true. The Suloi, only 1 night, not any more than that. For a tiny, we learned in a Baisa, Rabbi Yossi Agluli Omer, Minayin lePesach Mitzrayim, She'ein Chimutzoi Noyeg Eliyam Echad. How do you know Pesach Mitzrayim that the Chametz was only 1 day? Guys, the Kasha, Yom Echad, 1 day, not 1 night. That's the Kasha. Talmud Loima, Layochel Chametz, the Samach Le Hayom Yotzim. So you see that what? It's 1 day. So how can you tell me that Pesach, the Chametz is only what? 1 night. You see what? It's a day. Elahachi Kama. Here's the way you read the Mishnah. Laila Echad, it's not, the Pesach is 1 night. For who adin Pesach l'Doris is also 1 night. So that v'chimutzoi and the din of chametz is kol hayoim. Pesach l'Doris no kol shiva. Go back to the Mishnah. I'll stick it in the Mishnah for you guys. Look back in the Mishnah. I know. B'layla echad, right? B'layla echad, and who adin Pesach is what? Is Laila echad. Who adin Pesach is Laila echad. Chametz is 1 day. Pesach l'Doris chametz is no kol shiva. That's where you read the Mishnah. That's where you read the Mishnah. Okay, new Mishnah. Okay, as Akdama to this Mishnah, there's a very interesting halacha at the end of Pashas Vayikra. It's called the Pasha of Temura. A person, if he goes ahead and takes a korban, and he says, "I want to switch the kedusha from this korban onto this korban," the halacha is they're both kodesh. It's asa to do. You're not supposed to do it. The Sefer of Chinuch says a very interesting reason. I'm not sure it's Sefer Chinuch the Rambam. I remember from somewhere. I have to look it up. What happens to the guy who feels like really close to HaKadosh Baruch when he says, I'm taking my prize bull and I'm making it into a carbon. So his prize bull worth $5,000, sets it aside, this is going to be a carbon. He wakes up in the morning and says, what did I do? So he goes ahead and he takes some cheap, anything type of animal, and he says the kedusha of the bull should be on this. Since a person might do that, he might have charata, the Torah counsels him, and you know what? Not only is your bull kodesh, the other one's also kodesh. You lose on both ends. It's usher to do that. However, if you do it, it's chal. If you do it, it's chal. Now, we've been dealing with the following scenario. If you have a Pesach, you set it aside as a carbon Pesach, you lose it, and then you find it, right? You lose it, and then you find it. Good. So if you find it before you shech the first one, then whichever one you shech is your carbon Pesach, and the other one you have to graze until it gets a mum, and then sell it and bring a shlomen. Why? Because since you had two animals in front of you, by choosing one versus the other, you literally you rejected this animal. So it automatically can't become a carbon. You rejected it, you pushed it away. So on the other hand, if you lost your original Pesach, you then bring another one, you shech the other one, and then you find it afterwards, then it's a shlomen. Because it never was rejected. It's considered now Meiser Pesach. It's a leftover Pesach, and the halacha is a leftover Pesach is a shlomen. So you got the two scenarios: before shchita, after shchita. Before shchita, it's like I push it away, it can't be bought as a carbon. You have to wait till it gets the mum to take off in order to allow the redeeming process, because you can't redeem something that has kedushas aguf without it first getting a blemish. So if it's before the shchita, then in fact, you have to go ahead and let it graze. If after the shchita, I didn't push it away, it wasn't here. So what does it remain? An extra Pesach. Extra Pesach is a shlomen, and you can bring it as a shlomen, just like that. Good? What about tamura? What happens if I make a tamura? I take this animal and I say zu kizu. So the tamura is going to get the same halacha as the animal. If it was before shchita, the tamura will be, you have to wait till it gets a mum. If it's after shchita, it'll be a shlomen. Let's see it inside. That's the Mishnah. It's a Yedias and Kachim. Says the Gemara. Rav Yeshua. Shamati shetmuras Pesach kreva. I heard there are times that you bring a tamura of a Pesach as a carbon. Utmuras Pesach ain't a kreva. And I heard there's times that you can't bring it. And says Rabbi Yeshua, ve'enli lefarish. I forgot exactly when. So Amar Rabbi Akiva, says Rabbi Akiva, Ani Farish, I will explain. I'll explain, and I gave it to you. Eliezer Stern learned from Rabbi Akiva, so we cheated. Here's the Mishnah. Ha-Pesach shenimtza koidim shchita. You lost the Pesach. You lost it. You separated another one, and now you find the original, and they're both in front of you, and you shech one of them. The extra one, you graze it, let it get a mum, sell it, and you bring a shlamim. The reason you can't bring it directly as a shlamim, because since I rejected it biyadayim by bringing the other one, because they were both in the ballpark at the same time, and I rejected it by bringing the other one, therefore it's considered kedusha dechuya, and therefore you can't bring it as a carbon. And so too, if you would take a tmura and say zu kizu, it would have the same halacha. That is the one that tamura loy kara, that you don't bring as a carbon. What's the tamura that you do bring as a carbon? Achashchita, I separated a carbon Pesach. I lost it. I separated another one and I brought the other one. And now I find the original. It has the din of Meiser Pesach. Pesach karev shlamim v'chein tamura asai. The Pesach is bought as a shlamim, and so too is its tamura. Good. Now, there's an obvious question, guys. Why do you have to tell me first base and second base? Just tell me first base. There's a chiddush in the Mishnah. The difference between a Pesach that you find before Shchita and a Pesach that you find after Shchita. And you're telling me second base. V'chein Tmura Asai. Who cares about the Tmura? Forget the Tmura. Let's just look at the Pesach itself. There's an afkamina and halacha if I at the Pesach before Shchita or after Shchita. Why are you bringing in Tamura? Says the Gemara, Belema Pesach Karev or Pesach Ena Karev. Why did Rabbi Yeshua say, I heard there's a din of Tamura where it's brought and a Tamura where it's not brought? Tell me there's a din of Pesach when the Pesach is brought after Shechita and the Pesach's not brought if it's before Shechita. In other words, tell me the Chiddush in the whole din of Tamura only gets it extended because it has the din of the Pesach that it's representing, that's Zukazu. So tell me the din of Pesach. What are you saying between Tamura? Says Gemara Hakamashimon. The Ikat Tmuras Pesach like Karva. There's such an animal, literally, don't excuse the pun intended, right? There's such an animal that Tamura is not brought. Guys, you could say the following. Tamura is always its own. Tamura, it wasn't around B'Shatz Kedusha. You never meant it to be a Pesach. It didn't get lost. So you would think that what? It could be a Shlomim, even before Shechita. Kamashmalan, that no. Kamashmalan, that there is such an animal that is not brought because it gets the exact Kedusha of the animal that it manifested in. Itmar, Rabbi Omar, Koidim Shechita Ul'acha Shechita Shaninu. When did you find the animal? Before Shechita or after Shechita? That's the way we learned in our Mishnah. Reb Zera Omar, Koidim Chatzois Ul'acha Chatzois. You hear this, guys? Loi Reb Zera, in the morning, I went ahead and I separated my Pesach. I lost it. And I separated a new one. It's after Chatzois. I did not shech the new one yet, and I find the old one. Loi Reb Zera, it's out of the ballpark. The original is out of the ballpark. Because since it wasn't around when the Kaviyas of Pesach came at Chatzois, it's out. That's a big Kiddush. Anyway, it doesn't depend upon the action of Shechita. It depends upon the time frame of when you can perform Shechita. Guys, the Mishnah says, the Mishnah says Shechita doesn't say anything about Zman, doesn't say anything about Chatzois. It says openly. It says Shechita. So how can he say that goes after Chatzois? And for the Gemara, Ema Koidim Zman Shechita's Pesach. Before the Zman of Shechita's Pesach, which in fact is Chatzois. It says no Kitanois, so Machlokas Tanoim. Ha-Pesach Shenimsa Koidim Shechita, a Pesach that you find before Shechita, you ro'eh, you graze it. La'acha Shechita, a Pesach that you found after Shechita, Yikrov, you bring it as a carbon. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Koidim Chatzois Yiro'eh, La'acha Chatzois Yikrov. So Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Zera had Rabbi Eliezer to be Tolian, that it doesn't depend upon before Shechita, after Shechita, it depends upon what? Before Chatzois or after Chatzois. Okay. Amar Rava, says Rava, Loi Shanu, we did not learn that the Tamura you can bring as a carbon. Again, let's go over this scenario again so we don't forget. You had a Pesach, you lost it, you separated another one, and you brought it as a carbon. Now, and you had a Tamura, and the Tamura you said should be like the one that was lost. The halacha is it's a shlomim. Loi shanu that the Tamura is a shlomim. Ela shenimsa acha shchita vehema by acha shchita. You found the original after you shechted the replacement, and you did the Tamura after you did the replacement. Guys, got it? Here's what happened. Original, shechted. Original, replacement, shechted replacement, original, Tamura. So since the Tamura, you found this after Shechita, it's a Shlomim, the Tamura is a Shlomim. Okay, I don't know what the story with that is. Anyway, Aval Nimtza Koidim Shechita. If you find it, a teacher will use anything that he has at hand. If you don't have a blackboard, so you have your fingers, right? So that's also a pun, unintended. Now, listen to this, guys. Listen to this. Guys, case, look at me. Look at me. What happened was the following: lost it, right? Found it. You lost it, found it. You shechted then one of them, and then you did the Tamura after the Shechita. So if I did the Tamura, it was found after the Shechita, clearly it's a Tamura of Shlomim. Says Rava, if I did the Tamura after Shechita, since this animal cannot be brought as a carbon, it has to get a mum. This also, Tamura cannot be brought as a carbon. Once the animal is out of the ballpark, even if you make the Tamura after you shechted the original or the second one, after you shechted it, nonetheless, this animal was nitcha, it was rejected because it was around at the same time. Once it's rejected, the Tamura will be what? Will be unacceptable. You'll have to wait to get a mum in order to be paid it, even though you made the Tamura after the Shechita. Says the Gemara. Abaya is going to ask the following question. Now, fellas, in the parsha of the Torah, it says the following in parsha Shlomim. Now I have good fingers. Watch. In Tzoin, it says if Tzoin Karbano, then it says im Kesev, and then it says im Eiz. Now, l'chayra Tzoin is a general term, and Eiz and Bakar are both examples of Tzon, of small livestock. Good. So therefore, the word Kesev is extra, because when you say im Eiz over here, obviously when you said Tzoin, you must have been speaking about a sheep. There's only two types of livestock, sheep and goats. So once you explicitly stated goats, it must be that Kesev was, when it said in Tzoin, it must be speaking about Kesev. So the word Kesev is extra. And then the word im is also extra. So now, Esvei Abayah, im Kesev, ma tamalema im Kesev, why do you say it for sheep? L'Rabbi's Tmuras HaPesach, to include the Tmur of Pesach, Achar Pesach, after Pesach, Shekir v'Shlamim. Just like an animal after Pesach is a Shlamim, so the Tmur is a Shlamim. Hechi Dami, what exactly is the case? When did you make this Tmura? Guys, you found the animal after Shchita, so it's Meiser Pesach, right? You had two animals. You had one animal, you lost it. You replaced it. You shechted the replacement. You find the original. What's the chiddush? Of course, this is a shlamim, and the Tmura is going to be a shlamim. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that the Tmura of a shlamim is a shlamim. A Meiser Pesach is a full-fledged shlamim. The Tmura of a Meiser Pesach is a shlamim. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. It must be there's a bigger chiddush over here. What's that bigger chiddush? Here it is. Elolav shenimtza kodim shchita. You lost it and you found it, and now you have two animals. The Hema boy Achashchita, and then you brought one of them and you did a Tmura, and it says it's a Shlamim. You must have done it after Shchita. So guys, you had two, you shechted one, and now you make a Tmura after the Shchita. And the pasuk tells me that it's a Shlamim. So how can you Rava say, or it's Rabba, how can you Rabba say that after Shchita, since it comes me koyach the chuya, and it's not a good carbon, I got a pasuk saying in that scenario it is a good carbon. It's a shlamim. Says Merlois, you learn the wrong pshat. That's not what the pasuk is coming to teach me. It's not. In other words, it's not a corollary case. The case is speaking after. It's not speaking about before after. It's speaking about after. The kra asmachta ba'alma. And in other words, the pasuk is just an asmachta. It's just there. But I knew the din in Sfara. I knew the din that after Shchita, since it's a Meiser Pesach, it's a Shlamim, the Tmur is also a Shlamim. I knew that din. There's a pasuk. The pasuk's not teaching me anything. It's an asmachta. It's coming to support my Sfara. So now the question is, if it's not coming to teach me that, what is it coming to teach me, right? So Ella Krolam, I also, in logic, what is the pasuk coming to teach me? Kidatanya. Kesev, it's when it says Kesev, the Rabbi says a Pesach la'aliyah. Now, there's one of the emurim that is unique to some kabbanis is called the aliyah. It's literally the fatty tail. What it is the tailbone. You know, on the outside you see a tail, but it's the tailbone. It's the one that's opposite the kidneys. If you look at picture an animal like this, and the kidneys are in the back, the bone that's opposite the kidneys from there, that's emurim. It does not say aliyah openly by sheep, and therefore it's necessary in Kesef to teach me the aliyah. What about the im? The Rabbi's Pesach Shavuos Shnasai, a Pesach that's a year old. It's over a year. It's got to be a year old, and that's over a year. Ushlamim abo machmas Pesach, and the shlamim that comes as a result of a Pesach. Rashi in the second lashon says it's the carbon chagigas yud dalet. That's a chagiga shlamim that comes machmas Pesach. The chometz is shlamim. In other words, You might think that a Pesach. Why is a Pesach a shlamim? Only because it passed by its year. So it went from being a Pesach to a shlamim. Why am I bringing a Chagigas Yud Dalid? Not so much for itself, but I should be satiated in order to eat the Pesach. So you might think these two korbanos are limited to the halachos of Pesach, right? Kimash Malon, that they are shlamim, and they need a tnuf v'chaz of a shoik, they need 2 sprinklings, as we'll see. Says the Gemara now. What does the Im Kesef come to teach me? The Rabbi's Pesach Shavuos Shenasai, Pesach that's more than a year old, Ushlamim Mabo Machmas Pesach, L'chol Mitzvah Shlamim. All the mitzvahs are shlamim. 1, Shetoyin Smicha. Guys, the Korban Pesach does not require smicha. A Korban Shlamim does. Unisachim. A Korban Pesach does not require the accompanying libations of a mincha and nisach yayin, and Shlamim does. Tnufachas of a shok, the waving of the chest and the back foot. Even though a Pesach doesn't, these do. So even though these shlamim kami koyecha Pesach, nonetheless they are shlamim. That's why Im Kesef comes to teach me. Now, ukishayma v'im eis. Now it continues. The parsha says v'im eis. It's above. Hefsek inyan limed ala eis shein tun ma'alya. That the eis you don't have to go ahead and take from its backside from that's opposite the kidneys. Now that's one way to learn. Now what? So this was a chumrah. We're saying that it comes mekayach the chuya, and in fact, even after shchita, the tamura could not be bought. Now we're going to learn a kula. Ikad the masmila aresha. There are those who learn this dialogue of Rabbah on the Reisha of our Mishnah. So we're going to have the exact same Gemara, but it's going to be going on the Reisha, not the Sefer. What does it say in the Reisha? HaPesach shenimtza koidim shtita, not achas shtita. Koidim shtita, HaPesach yiroya ad sheyistayev. The Pesach you have to graze until it gets a mum. The Yom Chav Yom Yidam B'Shlamim. The Chen Tumurasai Tumur will have the same din. Now on that says Rabbi is din. I'm a Rabbi. I changed the Gersa. Rashi changed the Gersa. I'm a Rabbi, right? Rashi changed the Gersa. I'm a Rabbi. Lo yishanu ela shenimtzu koidim shtita. Only if you found it before shchita, v'hima by koidim shchita. Aval nimtzu koidim shchita. They're both in the world, both of them. V'hima by after shchita, tumrasa krevish shlamim. So now you tell me the opposite of the first lashon, guys. Lost it, found it, separated the second one, and you went ahead, brought one of them. Tamura, it's a shlamim. That's the opposite, right? You told me before it says the same din. No, it's a shlamim. My timer, ki kava shchita. When is shchita kaveya? Midi the chazile, something that it's seen. So when I had 2 psachim in front of me and I shechted one, the other one was in the ballpark and I used nitcha. But after you magdish the animal after the shchita, the animal wasn't chazile, it wasn't kaidish yet, it was chulin, right? But midi the loy chazile, like this tamura, loy kava, the shchita is not kaveya, and therefore it's bought as a shlamim. We're going to slug up this last pshat. We're going to slug it up. The same kasha in Kesev, it says in Kesev, it's extra. The Rabbi's Tamur's Pesach, Acha Pesach, Shekrev Shlamim, Amen Aleph. Yachal Afle Lefnei Pesach came. I might think even before Pesach, that Tamur's Pesach is bought as a Shlamim. Tamalema who Karev, Dafka what? The Pesach itself is bought as a Shlamim. Vein Tamur's Pesach Kreva. Now, Hekidami, that's exactly the case. If you found the animal before shchita, and you did it to mur before shchita, you can't bring as a carbon. Why don't we read a pasuk? Tell me it's not a shlamim. El must be lav shenim tzakayim shchita. The him bayachas shchita. That you found it before shchita, and you did tamur after shchita. And you're telling me that only the pesach's a shlamim, but the tamur is not a shlamim. This would upshlag Rabbi second lashon. Tiyufta the Rabba tiyufta. It's an upshlag on Rabba. It's an upshlag. Okay, Bez Hashem. I'm going to try to get tomorrow